Our next presenter is Brian DeSono on patron privacy, a luxury concern for marginalized internet users.
Hi everyone, my name is Brian DeSono. I'm a third-year PhD student at Syracuse University. I'm very excited to be here. This is my second iConference, like the moderator said, the focus of this study is going to be about patron privacy. This study is really focused on the overlap between digital inclusion and privacy regulation. I'm an HCI scholar by training, so I've never really taken any courses in librarianship, and I was just really curious to learn more about privacy through the lens of librarians, since we do share this information space. I'm going to be going real quickly at the background of digital inclusion so that we're all on the same page. The emergence of information and communication technologies has transformed today's economy through the diffusion of new tools such as personal computers, mobile phones, and the internet. ICTs have also improved how modern society interacts, earns a living, but there are multiple disparities associated with ICT deployment and access. For example, factors such as race, education, and income are widely regarded as the leading causes of those disparities, which add to this digital divide. Numerous community programs who overcome the digital divide promote digital inclusion, which fosters the ability of individuals and groups to access and use ICTs to address these barriers by leveling the playing field of technological access for underserved populations. And these vulnerable populations include low-income families, rural communities, elderly, disabled citizens, at-risk youth, immigrants, refugees, and people of color. This work provides recommendations aimed at influencing policy and awareness for digital inclusion within public libraries, and this work seeks to understand information sharing context that internet users of public libraries consider sensitive, with those contexts identified in privacy scholarship or privacy regulation. So the Onondaga County Public Library system, which is located in central upstate New York, has been the site of this research, and this system categorizes its libraries into one of two types, depending on its specific environment. So as a library here could either be a city library or a suburban library. And the librarian of each of these branches is my unit of analysis. So Syracuse is the largest city in the county, and according to the 2010 US Census, among Onondaga County residences, 97.6 identify being one race, and of these, 81.6 self-identify as white, 10.9 identify as black, nearly 3% of Onondaga's total population self-identifies as Asian, and less than 1% as Native American. Interestingly, since 2007, over 6,000 refugees have resettled in the Syracuse area, primarily from Southeast Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. There's also significant disparity in income between Onondaga County and Syracuse residents. Especially striking is the poverty rate among children in Syracuse, where 49%, nearly half of those under age 18, live in poverty, compared to 21% in Onondaga County. And according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the unemployment rate within Onondaga County was 7.1% in 2013. And it's important that I share these demographics with you so that you understand how the diversity is within the scope of Syracuse. So from this study, there were two main research questions. First, from the perspective of librarians, to what extent and in what ways do internet users of marginalized groups protect their online privacy in public libraries? And secondly, what type of security strategies are librarians currently employing to assist these groups in meeting their information needs? So using a number of approaches, the data collection process involves two phases, which all took place during the spring of 2014. I conducted a semi-structured interview with the branch managers of select Onondaga County Public Library branches so that I could get buy-in and insight into their privacy systems, into the norms of their county's privacy systems. And over the span of 2 weeks, I contacted all of the branch managers via email and arranged face-to-face meetings at their respective branch locations. From April to May 2014, I conducted a total of 5 interviews with these branch managers, and these interviews were recorded, transcribed, and coded to transform raw data into a standardized format for content analysis. From these discussions, I conducted a site observation and documented the various types of technology and privacy safeguards available for specific users at these branches. I also drew quantitative data from the complete pool of Onondaga County Public Library branch managers. Based off of the interview responses collected from these interviews, I designed a survey consisting of closed-ended questions inquiring branch managers' budgetary priorities, privacy, policies, and interactions with these marginalized groups. Data between survey responses from the city branches were analyzed through statistical means, and the second phase of this collection ran for approximately 2 weeks after the interviews with these branch managers. By focusing on in-depth, granular, and accurate data, this research aims for a robust and synergistic approach to the study of privacy among marginalized communities, thereby working around some known limitations of online privacy research. And thus far, there have been three really reoccurring themes that have been emerging from these interviews. First, privacy standards remain pretty consistent amongst all Onondaga County Public Library branches, and I'll get more into this in a bit. Also, secondly, offline privacy really isn't given as much attention to as online privacy protocols in library spaces at Onondaga County. And third, there's just a general lack of concern for privacy among marginalized patrons. So whether patrons need help filing for bankruptcy, searching for a job, or borrowing textbooks, librarians assist patrons with their information needs in a variety of ways. Across the board, however, Onondaga County Public Libraries share common privacy standards that remain pretty consistent in each branch in an attempt to preserve the privacy of their patrons, and I'll go over a couple examples here. Libraries are especially careful about the placement of their computers. They strategically angle computer monitors so that patrons experience a sense of privacy, but patrons are not so isolated that computer monitors are out of the line of sight for librarians. And each branch actually has curved mirrors near the ceiling corners so that all areas of the library are visible from the main desk of each branch. And they tend, even though they have access to look over closely what their patrons are doing, they do not make any attempt to do any shoulder surfing for the patrons because they do respect that for them. Librarians also pay much more attention to online privacy than do in offline privacy. One example of what I mean by this is that all the computers within Onondaga County Public Library are installed with Envisionware, which is a type of security software that automates computer session management, reports system diagnostics, and filters online content for young children. As each patron signs on for their session, a copy of the Onondaga County Public Library's internet policy appears and must be agreed to before the patron can continue with the session. Each patron is given a set amount of computer time, and upon session expiration, the software clears the patron's entire browsing history, and the computer also times out after 10 minutes of inactivity. This filtering is actually required by SIPA, the Children's Internet Protection Act, in order for Onondaga County Public Library branches to remain eligible for government funding. On the other hand, when looking at offline privacy norms, the majority of these libraries do not provide desk partitions or similar mechanisms to prevent shoulder surfing from nearby patrons. And since libraries operate in a public setting, patrons are limited with what they can do to preserve the privacy of their offline surroundings. Based on their interactions with marginalized patrons within the library, managing librarians also noted how some patrons simply ignore or dismiss basic privacy protocols. For example, I've pasted some of the interesting insights on screen. One librarian said and observed how patrons left their credit, debit, and even social security cards in plain sight next to other active computer users when entering into sensitive information online. And one of the librarians said that sometimes people think that because they're poor that their identity is not vulnerable. They think that they're not an easy target because they don't have something worth stealing. Another librarian also finds that there seems to be just a general lack of concern for preserving personal privacy among these patrons. She says, when you're worried that you're getting evicted tomorrow, privacy isn't your biggest issue. Privacy is a luxury concern. So these face-to-face interviews with these managing librarians largely influenced the design of the electronic surveys that I sent out, which aim to garner a holistic view of the Onondaga County Public Library landscape through accurate measures. And these surveys were only sent out to librarians of each branch. And the paper in the I-Conference proceedings presents an analysis of all 9 of the city branch survey responses. So visualized here in the word cloud is a list of some of the common safeguards that these librarians implement in their library. When asked about the types of privacy measures that librarians implement, this includes browser cache clearing, internet proxy disclaimers, and paper shredders. Those seem to be the most popular. The survey also asked managing librarians to assess their library's performance on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 as weakest and 10 as strongest, and a variety of topics within the survey was evaluated, including the adequacy of privacy training for library staff, digital literacy programs for marginalized groups, implementation of a local privacy policy, and internal auditing of computer security software. This graph shows the average of the managing librarians' self-reported ratings. And again, it's important to keep in mind that these are self-evaluations of the librarian's branch. And results of their attitudes, they really rank digital literacy programs in internal auditing higher than their means for providing adequate privacy training for their staff and implementing privacy policies. So these findings suggest that managing librarians within Onondaga County must prioritize their attention to providing professional development in privacy training for their staff and implementing proper privacy policies in their branches. And this lack of educational practice may bear negative implications if marginalized patrons are left unresolved. Onondaga County branch managers qualify marginalized patrons to be holders of the New York State Benefit Card, which determines eligibility for Medicaid, cash assistance, food stamps, as well as other social welfare programs for families and individuals in poverty. As concerns for personal privacy and security in digital contexts increase, these patrons cannot afford to have their online identity stolen or fall prey to internet phishing schemes. Yet, marginalized patrons are the most susceptible group to such harms. Libraries should lead the charge in providing resources to protect their patrons' privacy. Now, understandably, managing librarians are stretched for financial resources to address all areas of improvement at once. However, with this data, librarians within Onondaga County are better informed to negotiate and allocate future budgetary spending towards privacy-preserving practices. Overall, this research contributes to the broad goal of assessing technology policies designed to improve information access for underserved populations in America. Access to ICTs improve quality of life and provides the opportunity for people in marginalized communities to civically engage in the world around them. Without access to global information and services, marginalized communities will continue to experience economic and social attrition when connectivity with the wider world remains absent. I briefly want to acknowledge Dr. Jennifer Stromberg-Galley. This project actually was born in internet methods course taught at the Syracuse iSchool, and also grateful for the iterative feedback that my classmates were able to give and to help me to publish and push this towards a conference proceeding. This is my references, and I would love to continue this conversation even after the presentation. Here's my contact information, and you can also follow me online with the alias Bidasono. So thank you so much, and at this time I'll be taking questions.
Privacy trainings, internal training that libraries can adopt, or some sort of strategy that can easily be implemented so that library directors, small public libraries don't have to invent this on their own.
Yeah, in the summer of 2013, when the NSA revelations were taking place and the whole Edward Snowden thing was catching the world by storm, the ALA actually put together a statement of their stances on privacy, and from those statements, that has actually really helped inform where there are certain stances on making sure that patrons, for example, their browsing activity isn't logged permanently. So those statements in response to the summer 2013 Edward Snowden revelations, I think really cemented the importance of privacy within libraries, and the ALA has been working really hard to advocate for that.
Just regarding the offline privacy, the lack of partitions and the mirrors and plain sight things, do you think that in some ways that's a form of coercive discipline or some kind of surveillance to discourage deviant behavior on library terminals?
That's a great question. It's interesting because when we look at the university library setting, you do see these partitions, and you do see, I think, more enhanced offline privacy in these university settings. So it's interesting in a public setting sort of sense, to see lower privacy practices enabled. I do want to look into that further. Surveillance is definitely an interesting topic, and I'd actually like to talk to you a little bit after this whole presentation about that question. Thank you. Yeah.
Have there been opportunities in your research to talk to some of the groups or patrons using these and to find out more about how they view privacy and what they feel is, conducive or not to that?
Yeah, so I originally, I did a summer study in DC in the summer, and I got to interact with the patients that way. Here at Syracuse, I was not able to because of certain IRB restrictions. And because this was initially born out of a class project, there was a systematic timeline for me to follow. But that is, I think, I'm a firm believer of participatory action research, and that's what I want to integrate into my ongoing research. Because I think it's really important that we avail the different types of struggles and challenges that these groups are facing so that we give agency to their voice.
Even what you've done, I think, is very valuable. I think I teach librarians. I think if you ask librarians, what do they think about people using Google? They may think, oh, people don't have information literacy, and they may report different attitudes about that. I'm curious whether, you're reflecting their attitudes about privacy and privacy for these populations, which I think is important. And I think extending that work to see what the populations themselves think about this could be more powerful.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.